Welcome to my channel, Super Rare Coins. Today is best, top 3 coins. Please don't skip this video. The 1959 Elizabeth II halfpenny belongs to the final generation of Britain's pre-decimal bronze coins struck during the early years of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. This period in British currency history represents a transitional moment. The nation was still using a monetary system rooted in medieval times, where £1 equaled 240 pence, and the halfpenny was worth 1/480th of a pound. It was an almost symbolic denomination by this point, holding modest buying power, yet still important for ensuring exact change in everyday transactions. The coin served as one of the smallest circulating denominations in Britain, and its design carried forward the maritime themes that had been part of the halfpenny since 1937. By 1959, the coin retained a strong connection to both Britain's historic self-image and its practical role in the pockets of the people. The obverse of the 1959 halfpenny features the first definitive portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, sculpted by Mary Gillick. This portrait was introduced in 1953, shortly after the Queen's accession in 1952, and is notable for its fresh, uncrowned depiction of the monarch. The Queen is shown facing right, her youthful features framed by a laurel wreath, an artistic choice that evokes classical imagery and symbolizes peace, honor, and timeless dignity. Around the portrait is the Latin legend, Elizabeth II Dei Gratia Regina F. Laughing Face : which translates to Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen Defender of the Faith. This inscription not only conveys her constitutional and religious roles, but also reflects the centuries-old tradition of Latin inscriptions on British coinage. The obverse design is framed by a beaded border, giving it both structure and protection from wear. On the reverse side, the 1959 halfpenny proudly displays the image of the Golden Hind, the famous galleon captained by Sir Francis Drake during his historic circumnavigation of the globe between 1577 and 1580. The design was created by Thomas Humphrey Paget, one of the most respected coin designers of the mid-20th century. The ship is depicted in full sail with striking attention to detail. The flowing rigging, the taut lines of the masts, and the shape of the hull all contribute to a sense of life and movement. The surrounding sea is suggested with light wave lines, giving a subtle impression of the ship cutting through the water. Above the ship, the denomination, halfpenny, is inscribed in bold, evenly spaced capital letters, while the date, 1959, appears beneath the vessel. Like the obverse, the reverse is enclosed within a toothed border for protection against edge wear. The coin was struck in bronze, an alloy of approximately 97% copper, 2.5% zinc, and 0.5% tin. This metal mix gave the coin a warm reddish gold hue when freshly minted, though circulation often caused the surface to darken and develop rich brown or even near black patinas. With a diameter of 25.48 mm, a weight of 5.67 grams, and a smooth plain edge, the halfpenny was a solid yet small coin in the hand. Its smooth edge was typical for low-denomination British coins, as the absence of milled patterns simplified production, and was considered sufficient for a coin of such low value, which was rarely counterfeited. In 1959, production of the halfpenny was carried out at the Royal Mint in London. While exact mintage numbers for the year ran into the millions, making the coin common at the time, the denomination was already in slow decline in terms of daily use. Inflation throughout the 1950s had gradually eroded its purchasing power. By the end of that decade, a halfpenny could buy only the smallest of goods, perhaps a piece of penny candy at a sweet shop or a portion of newspaper cost. Despite this, the Royal Mint continued to strike large numbers of the coins to meet the needs of exact change across the country. The Britain of 1959 was a very different place from the one in which the halfpenny was first conceived centuries earlier. The nation was emerging from the post-war era with a growing consumer economy, modernizing industry, and a cultural shift toward efficiency. Decimalization of the currency was already being discussed in government circles, though it would not come into effect until 1971. In this climate, the 1959 halfpenny served as both a practical tool for commerce and a small emblem of the country's enduring traditions. The use of the Golden Hind design, with its ties to the Elizabethan age of exploration, was more than decorative. It subtly connected the reign of Elizabeth II with that of her great namesake Elizabeth I, projecting an image of continuity, pride, and resilience. From a collector's point of view, the 1959 Elizabeth II halfpenny is not a rare coin in circulated grades. Because millions were minted and used heavily in daily transactions, most surviving examples show significant wear, particularly on the high points of the Queen's portrait and the fine details of the ship. However, uncirculated examples with full original mint luster are much scarcer and can be highly appealing. Such coins display a bright golden red glow and sharp strike details that bring out the artistry of both Gillick's and Paget's designs. For numismatists, finding a well-preserved example from 1959 offers a satisfying glimpse into the coinage of early Elizabethan Britain. The 1959 issue also marks the midpoint in the lifespan of the Elizabeth II pre-decimal halfpenny, which would continue in production until 1967 for circulation, and a little later for collector's sets. After decimalization in 1971, the denomination was withdrawn from circulation, and most coins were melted down. This means that while the coin was once extremely common, its survival in high-grade form is less frequent than one might imagine. Over the decades, its small size and historical charm have made it a favorite among collectors who specialize in early Elizabeth II coinage pre-decimal sets or maritime-themed designs. In terms of cultural resonance, the 1959 halfpenny captures a moment when Britain balanced tradition with change. It was a time when the monarchy was young, the coinage retained classical and historic motifs, and the old ways of measuring money still governed everyday life. Yet in the background, modernization was underway, and the halfpenny's days were already numbered. Today the coin serves as a bronze relic of that era, an artifact small in size but rich in meaning, linking the grandeur of the Golden Hind's voyages to the pocket change of ordinary mid-20th century Britons. Next, the 1960 Elizabeth II halfpenny is part of the final era of pre-decimal British coinage before the great monetary changeover to the decimal system in 1971. The halfpenny, worth 1/200th of a pound sterling, had been a staple of British currency since the 13th century, but by the mid-20th century its purchasing power had significantly diminished. In 1960, Britain was still deeply entrenched in its traditional pre-decimal system, where 1 pound equaled 20 shillings and 1 shilling equaled 12 pence, making 240 pence to the pound. The halfpenny was thus a very small unit, but it remained in use for minor purchases and to ensure exact change. The 1960 issue represents a mid-period coin in Queen Elizabeth II's reign, having succeeded her father King George VI in 1952. At this point in her reign, her youthful portrait was still used, and the designs of the coinage were firmly rooted in tradition. The obverse of the coin features the first definitive portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by the talented sculptor Mary Gillick. This portrait shows the Queen facing right, wearing a laurel wreath, rather than the crown seen on later issues. Symbolizing peace and classical dignity, Gillick's design was widely admired for its youthful and fresh depiction of the monarch, deliberately avoiding the overly formal or stiff style of earlier royal coin portraits. Around the portrait runs the Latin Elizabeth II Dei Gratia Regina F. Laughing Face : which expands to Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen Defender of the Faith. The lettering is in a clean serif font, evenly spaced around the rim and separated from the portrait by a raised beaded border that adds a sense of balance and craftsmanship. The reverse of the 1960 halfpenny bears one of the most recognizable designs in British coinage, the Golden Hind, the famous galleon captained by Sir Francis Drake on his circumnavigation of the globe between 1577 and 1580. This design was created by artist Thomas Humphrey Paget, a prolific designer of British and Commonwealth coinage. The ship is shown in full sail with a sense of movement captured by the flowing rigging and billowing sails. The level of detail in the depiction is remarkable for such a small coin. One can discern the lines of the masts, the pattern of the rigging, and even the texture of the waves. Above the ship is the word halfpenny, while the date 1960 is placed below. The design is encircled by a toothed border, providing a visual frame and preventing excessive wear from affecting the main details. The coin was struck in bronze, an alloy of approximately 97% copper, 2.5% zinc, and 0.5% tin. The bronze composition gave the coin a warm reddish-brown color when new, though with circulation it would darken to a deep chocolate brown or even a smooth blackened tone due to oxidation and handling. The diameter of the coin was 25.48 millimeters with a weight of 5.67 grams and a thickness of around 1.5 millimeters. Its smooth edge was typical of low-denomination coins which did not require edge lettering or milling for anti-counterfeiting purposes. In 1960, halfpennies were struck at the Royal Mint in London. This was a period when coin production was still centralized in Britain before much of it moved to branch mints abroad or to modernized facilities. The mintage for the 1960 halfpenny was relatively high as the denomination was still circulating widely. Millions were produced to meet the needs of everyday commerce. However, being a small value coin, they were often subject to heavy wear, meaning well-preserved examples in high grade are less common today than one might expect for such a recent issue. The historical backdrop of the 1960 halfpenny is interesting. Britain at the time was experiencing post-war recovery with increasing affluence, modernization, and a move toward European-style efficiency in many sectors, including currency. Yet decimalization was still over a decade away, and the coinage of the time carried deep symbolism tied to Britain's imperial and maritime heritage. The Golden Hind design, for example, was a proud reminder of Britain's Elizabethan seafaring glory, a nod to the reign of Elizabeth I and the country's long naval tradition. By including this imagery on one of the smallest denominations, the Royal Mint ensured that even the humblest transactions carried a reminder of national history and pride. From a collector's standpoint, the 1960 Elizabeth II half penny is not rare in circulated condition, but it holds appeal for those interested in the pre-decimal era and in the first portrait coinage of Elizabeth II. High-grade, uncirculated examples with full original mint luster are far scarcer and can command higher prices. Such coins would show a rich golden red or bright coppery sheen without the dark toning that develops after circulation. Proof versions were not struck for circulation in 1960, but some specimen quality strikes exist for collectors in royal mint sets. Over time, the 1960 halfpenny became obsolete due to both inflation and the decimalization of the British currency system. In February 1971, when the United Kingdom converted to the decimal pound, the smallest unit became the new halfpenny, worth 1/200th of a pound, instead of the old pre-decimal halfpenny worth 1/480th of a pound. The older coins were withdrawn from circulation and most were eventually melted down. This mass withdrawal, combined with the fact that few people saved such small value coins, makes surviving examples in pristine condition increasingly collectible. In modern numismatics, the 1960 halfpenny serves as both a historical artifact and a charming example of mid-20th century coin. Rarity captures the youthful optimism of the early Elizabethan reign, the skill of the Royal Mint's engravers, and the enduring power of maritime symbolism in British culture. While not a coin of great monetary value for most collectors, it is rich in cultural and historical resonance, a tiny bronze window into a Britain that still operated on the currency system of its Victorian past yet was on the cusp of a modern transformation. Next, the 1967 Elizabeth II halfpenny holds a special place in British pre-decimal coinage history, not because of any rarity, but because it was the final year the halfpenny was struck for circulation in the United Kingdom. After 1967, the denomination would be retired from day-to-day use, although a few collector issues were minted later in the early 1970s. This makes the 1967 issue both historically significant and extremely common, a paradox that fascinates collectors. The coin is a closing chapter in the long life of the halfpenny, a denomination that had existed in England for over 700 years, dating back to hammered silver issues in the reign of Edward I. By the 1960s, however, the halfpenny's practical buying power was negligible and Britain was preparing for decimalization, which would finally take place in 1971. In this sense, the 1967 halfpenny is a farewell to a medieval relic, updated in bronze form for modern Britain. The obverse of the coin features the first official portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Mary Gillick and introduced in 1953. It shows a youthful monarch facing right, with her hair bound by a classical laurel wreath, a design choice that symbolized peace, dignity, and continuity with ancient traditions. Unlike later portraits, the Queen is uncrowned here, giving the image a softer, more approachable appearance. The legend, Elizabeth II Dei Gratia Regina F. Laughing Face: Elizabeth II by the grace of God, Queen Defender of the Faith, runs around the rim, rendered in a traditional serif font. This portrait, now nostalgic in its own right, was already over a decade old by the time of the 1967 issue, yet it retained its grace and charm until being replaced in 1971. The obverse design is framed by a raised beaded border, giving the coin a neat and finished appearance. The reverse is dominated by the image of the Golden Hind, the famous galleon captained by Sir Francis Drake during his world voyage of 1577-1580, designed by Thomas Humphrey Paget. This depiction of the ship had been used on the halfpenny since 1937, when it first replaced the older Britannia motif. The design is full of intricate maritime detail. The rigging, masts, sails, and hull are carefully rendered, and the ship appears to move across stylized waves. The Golden Hind is more than decorative. It's a deliberate historical reference to the Elizabethan age of discovery, drawing a symbolic line between Elizabeth I's era of exploration and the reign of her 20th century namesake. Above the ship, the words halfpenny are prominently displayed, while the date 1967 is centered beneath it.as, with the obverse, a toothed border, encloses the design, helping protect it from wear. The 1967 halfpenny was struck in bronze, consisting of approximately 97% copper, 2.5% zinc, and 0.5% tin. Fresh from the mint, the coin had a warm reddish golden hue, though in circulation it quickly toned to a darker brown or even a near black color from oxidation and handling. The coin measured 25.48 mm in diameter, weighed 5.67 grams, and had a plain, smooth edge. While these dimensions were standard for the denomination since its redesign in 1937, they were becoming outdated by the 1960s. When modern coinage was trending towards smaller lighter pieces to suit mechanized vending and counting systems, mintage of the 1967 halfpenny was enormous. Hundreds of millions were produced at the Royal Mint in London. In fact, the mintage was deliberately high because the denomination was being phased out and 1967 coins were intended to serve for several more years without further issues. Many were struck well into 1968, but all carry the 1967 date. As a result, the 1967 halfpenny is one of the most common coins in all of British numismatics. In circulated grades, it has almost no monetary value today, but in uncirculated condition with full mint luster, it can still be attractive to collectors who appreciate the artistry of the golden hind design and the historical importance of the year. The Britain of 1967 was already looking toward currency reform. Decimalization had been officially announced in 1966, and by the late 60s plans were in motion to retire old denominations like the farthing, already gone since 1960, and eventually the halfpenny. Inflation meant that the coin could barely buy anything, perhaps a single piece of penny candy or a small newspaper supplement. Yet it remained necessary for completing prices like 3 1/2D or 1 6 1/2D, which were still common in pre-decimal bookkeeping. The coin thus straddled practicality and obsolescence, surviving not because of its value but because of the peculiarities of Britain's old monetary system. For collectors, the 1967 halfpenny has two main appeals. It is the last circulating year of the denomination and the last time the golden hind appeared on a coin for everyday use. In high grades, these coins can still be found with beautiful red or red-brown mint luster, especially in old coin sets that were never opened. However, the vast mintage means they are never rare. Even pristine examples are relatively inexpensive compared to earlier dates. That said, proof and specimen strikings made for collector sets in 1967 are more desirable as they exhibit a mirror-like finish and sharply defined details. The withdrawal of the halfpenny after 1967 was not immediate. The coin continued circulating until decimalization in February 1971, when it was officially demonetized along with the rest of the old bronze series. Many coins were melted down, but millions were kept as souvenirs given their status as last year issues. This tendency for people to save them means that today they turn up in drawers, jars, and boxes of old change more often than almost any other pre-decimal coin. Symbolically, the 1967 Elizabeth II halfpenny is more than just an obsolete coin. It's the last whisper of a currency system that had survived for centuries. A small bronze reminder of a Britain on the cusp of major change. It captures the youthful portrait of the Queen before the updated decimal era designs, celebrates the romance of maritime history through the golden hind, and marks the end of a denomination that once had real purchasing power but, by the mid-20th century, had become little more than a pocket filler. While not valuable in the monetary sense, its historical significance makes it a worthy piece for any collection of British coinage. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe my channel for more videos.